So this, the sugya that we're going to spend a little bit of time on the next quite few sessions, I imagine, is, as it says on the top of the sheet, Chalav Stam for cheese production. Mm-hmm. And the concept, the context, what we're going to be discussing is, to what extent are these gzeiros separate? The gzeira of Chalav Stam and Gvinas Akum, to what extent are they separate? Do they overlap? And occasionally there will be concerns of one in the other. And we're going to start off with we're going to go through the sources, but the key case that we want to look at is, if we are going to potentially follow, we saw already last week that many, if not most, of certainly the American kashrus agencies follow Reb Moshe or Rav Henkin, really, to be fair, in allowing so-called soft cheese, right? The question is, what about the situation and the scenario, as we will see, where you have the cheese production, but does it also require that the chalav is chalav Yisrael? Yeah. Or are they separate? Do they overlap? And we will discover some really interesting, the makoros are very interesting, and they are very relevant for other sugis that we're going to go into, such as butter, yogurt, shamenet, etc., etc. And we'll see it also because there are byproducts. This is also very important. There are byproducts of cheese production, whey, which then gets put as whey powder and is used in candies, in cookies, and various other things. So it's really very quite complicated. We start off with a Gemara. That's the way to start. Yeah. Avodah Zarah. 1 second. So let me just point this out to you for your general knowledge, because you need to find your way around these sugyas a little bit. So, Avodah Zarah daf chavtes amud beis. It's not on your sheets. I'm just giving you, yeah. Avodah Zarah chavtes amud beis. There is a Mishnah which takes up half an amud, and it says as follows: Eilu dvarim shel oivdei kechavim asurin ve'isuron isur hana. Here are the various things that are forbidden because they are subsumed under the rubric of Avodah Zarah, and the isur includes hana and a whole list. And then there are other things which are Chazal forbade for various reasons, but they're not isur also b'hana. And one of them here is, and this is the end of the Mishnah, goes into a discussion of Gvinas beis unaiki shalov de kechavim asurin v'isur, a certain cheese of this place, Beis Anuki. It says, the Mishnah says it's also, and the Isser is an Isser Hana Divi Reb Meir, and the Chachamim say, no, it's not also Hana. Then there is a story in the Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Sha'al Rabbi Yishmael es Rabbi Yehoshua keshahayu mahalchin baderech. Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Yishmael were walking, and Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yehoshua, and he said to him, tell me, mipnei ma osru gevinos ovdei kechavim. Why? Remember, this is a Mishnah. Yeah, Chavtes Amud Beis. Why did Chazal forbid Gevinas Ovdei Kechavim? Omaloi. So Rabbi Yehoshua answered him, Mipnei shemamidin oisam bekeva shel nevela, because they use rennet of nevela. So then he asked him a question. V'haloi keva kevas oila achamura mikevas nevela. It doesn't really matter what the question is for our purposes. I don't want to go into it. And what he did was, he kept pestering him with comebacks and questions on what he'd asked. And he said to him, listen to this, it's actually very interesting. It said, Heisioi l'davar acher. In English we call it, he changed the conversation. You ever done that when you're talking to somebody and it's something, either because it's awkward or because you don't want to talk about it, so you change the conversation. And this is exactly what he did here in the Mishnah. He was pinning him down, because the reason he gave, for every reason he gave, there was a comeback and a question, and he was cornering him. And then he did something really interesting, and it's debatable why he did it. He took his conversation somewhere else, and he said to him, how do you say learn pshat in the pasuk? Ki tovim doidecha miyayin, or ki tovim doidecha? Doidayech, is it doidecha? And he told him a whole pshat. Finished. That's the end of the Mishnah. What? Exactly. What's going on? So, there is something going on. And then, 4 daf or so later, we have a Gemara about an Amud, and a bit. The Gemara discusses the Gzeira of Gvinas Akum and gives various reasons. Okay? So, that's done. The Gemara gives various reasons. We encountered some of them last week, and I'll share one with you because it's going to be relevant. We spoke about Rabbeinu Tam and the Goine Narvona. Remember Rabbeinu Tam? Rabbeinu Tam is here in a Toisos on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, and he is of the opinion that the reason cheese was asur was because of danger, poison, gilui. It was if the milk is left uncovered, and the poison of a snake could get into it. Simple as that. And therefore, where there is no concern for that. For a nikur, what's called nikur, but it's a different nikur. It means, I'll use the word gilui. It means that a snake could have left poison in the milk, therefore cheese is mutter, and there is therefore, and we saw that there were some communities where if they had a tradition, remember, the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah don't paskin like Rabbeinu Tam. We don't paskin like him. But Rabbeinu Tam is Rabbeinu Tam. His opinion was that it was a gzeira, purely a reaction to a situation which would be dangerous, and where there is no concern for that, you can absolutely buy and consume Gvinas Akum.
There's no problem about the thing itself.
Correct, exactly. Yeah. And there's a Tosfos here who brings Rabbeinu Tam and discusses it and has to explain the Gemara on the basis of that. Right, that's that. I'm only doing this so that you have the whole context. We now get to our sugya, right? So we're now on Lamed Hey Amud Beis. Okay? The Mishnah says, I didn't put the Mishnah in, so let me just read the Mishnah here for you. And then what we're going to do is what you have on your sheets here as source number 1 is the Gemara. So remember, there was a Mishnah Chaf Tes Amud Beis that discussed various things that Chazal forbade. Some of them were because of Avodah Zarah, and they were Osur Bana, others were not Osur Bana, and there was a discussion in the Mishnah and subsequently on Lamed Hey, Amud Aleph, about cheese. That sugya is done, just to be clear. Now we come to our Mishnah here, and it says, Ve'elu dvarim shelo ivdei kechovim asurim, ve'eini suran isur hana. Here is a list of things, what you and I would know as the various things that Chazal forbade us not to do with Avodah Zarah, and it's not Osur B'Hana. So what are they? I'll read them out. Chalav shechal ve'evid kechavim ve'ein Yisrael royehu. Milk that a Gentile milked, ve'ein Yisrael royehu, and there isn't a Jew to observe the proceedings. Just a quick comment. We're going to see one of the Rishonim point out that the difference in language between when we talk about cheese and when we talk about milk. When the Mishnah talks about gvina, it just says the gvina is osur. No qualifying, limiting factor. Here it says, Chalav shechol vo'akum ve'ein Yisrael ro'ehu. The implication being that with cheese, even if a Jew were to see it, it would still remain osur. With me?
Mm-hmm. Would see what? The process of?
Good question. Very good. Yeah. Very good, Gabby. Very good. Chalav, very clearly, the Mishnah says, it is because the Jew didn't see it. And we're going to discuss that. So, therefore, what is the problem? We're coming to that in 2 minutes when we do the Gemara. But the language that is used for the Gzeira of Gvina is just, the Gvina is Asur, which would imply that the Jew watching Gevina, whatever that means, would make absolutely difference. In other words, it's intrinsic. It's nothing to do with whether you can observe all or part of the process is irrelevant. Just pointing that out. We'll come back to that. And then we go on to the other stuff that you are aware of. Hapas, v'hashemen, pas akum, pas palto, or pas akum, shemen shelahen. Their oil. There was a time until Chazal repealed the Gezeira, where oil was exactly the same as pas and chalav. Yeah? Shlokoi su kvoshin, bishul akum, this is it, bishul akum, kvoshin su shlokin, etc. And various other things. Finished. Now we get to Gemara. That's the background, okay? Sorry, I just felt it was important to spend a couple of minutes, set the scene. Now the fun starts. You really need to, this is a proper shtickle Gemara that you need to have your You need to have your wits about you. We say in English. Wie sagen wir das auf Deutsch?
Have your wits.
Have your wits about you means be alert. We've got to really, really focus to get this clear. Be awake, be alert. Okay. Zog de Gemara, frag de Gemara. Chalav lemayne chashla. So okay, you've just told me in the Mishnah that I'm not allowed to have chalav, which a guy was chaylev and a Jew didn't oversee it. Lemayne chashla. What's the concern? Why am I worried? What exactly is the chashash? Says the Gemara. If the concern would be that the Gentile would say that it is milk of a cow and really it's milk of a camel, that he'll change it. He'll substitute it for something else and lie to you, whatever. If that's your concern, no concern. Tohoir chiver, tomei yaroik. They look different. They look different. Milk of a cow is white. That of a behemoth tmeya is green. Wow. Whether it means green, yellow, it doesn't matter. It looks different. In other words, you should be able just to look at it. If our concern is merely that he would, I nearly used the wrong word, that he would substitute ichlufi. That means he would give you something that and tell you it's cow's milk, but really it was camel's milk. No concern at all, because you could see it straight away. Says the Gemara, no. Ve'imishum iaruvi, he would adulterate it. He would. That's right. He would in English. You would say the correct English would be to adulterate it. As in, okay, because usually the word is often used in a context of relationships, adultery. But that's what it is. It's the mixing of things that shouldn't be mixed. Okay. So what he'll do is he'll put in, I don't know, 10% will be. Of course, in other words, it will be white enough. That's perhaps in the Gemara. It will be white enough that, as far as you're concerned, yeah, it looks like cow's milk to me. Yeah. But it could be that there's 5% camel milk in it. Yeah. And now the first idea of the Gemara is no longer relevant because it's white enough that I wouldn't raise any suspicion. Mm-hmm. But maybe he'll adulterate, put a bit of camel's milk in it. So the Gemara says, I have an eitzah. Nekum. See if you can translate it. Yeah. Yekum purkam. Nekum. Translate it. How's your Aramaic?
Cleaning it? I don't know. Nekum from...
Make it stand.
It's like
make it stand up. You kum. You nekum. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, then you know what? Simple. Coagulate it and you'll see. Right. How's that going to help? Says the Gemara. Domar mar, and this is a really important.
I always heard this principle that real, like kosher milk.
This is it.
But I didn't.
This is it. It's a domar mar. Yeah. Fridge magnet coming up. Very important. Chalav tahor I made. Chalav tomei einai I made. That's the Lashon HaGemara. Now there are machlokes rishonim about exactly how to understand this, and we'll get to it at some point. Says the Gemara, so I'm worried that he will adulterate it. He'll put, so it's white enough that I think it's cow's milk. So I can't tell from the color. But maybe put in 5% of camel's milk, Yaruvi. Says the Gemara, simple eitzah, neku. Make it stand, turn it into cheese. Just put it out in the sun if you want, or you can put some kevas, whatever in it. Answers the Gemara, you're right. If I want this milk from the Gentile because I want to make cheese, then you're right. You're absolutely right. All I need to do is take this milk, see if it stands, and then I know he didn't adulterate it. And in Ochanam it would be mutter. Okay. Says the Gemara, but I don't want to make cheese. I want kutach. I want some other sort of milk product which doesn't involve coagulating the milk. In other words, this is the Gemara. Nochamal. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. If I, the Jew, what I'm after is cheese, then I have an eitzah. You're right. I'm not worried about the color, that he substituted it totally, because I'll see the color. I'm not worried he'd adulterate it, because it won't stand. So, just very simple. Just do a science experiment. If you want cheese, make cheese out of it. If it's cheese, then you're good to go. No problemo. Okay. But the problem is that the Gemara says the reason why the problem with chalav is when you don't want cheese. The Mishnah is talking about a case where it says that chalav is asur, is where you don't want cheese. You want something else instead, you don't want to coagulate it, and now you have no way of knowing whether maybe there's 5% camel's milk in it.
Sounds like cheese is more mako than chalav then. Here, from this.
let's see. Very good. All of this, very good. Now the fun starts. The Gemara has an interim suggestion. Okay, so he wants kimcha, but now we're stuck. We're really stuck. This guy doesn't want to make cheese. He wants to make kutach. He wants to make something else. Take a little bit. V'nishkel minei kali v'nekum. So take a little bit. Okay, so you don't need to. You've got 1,000 liters. Take half a liter and put it in the sun and see, and then you'll know about the rest. Answers the Gemara. Kivan de betohir nami ikenis yuvi deloi kaimi. Because don't forget, in cheese, what happens when you make cheese? You are now experts in the understanding of the proteins and the caseins, and there's 2 proteins. There's casein and there is whey, and the whey is the nisyuvi, the meichalav. It's the whey is the liquid that runs off. The whole thing doesn't coagulate. Yeah. There is a byproduct. You separate the curds from the whey. The casein turns into curds. It coagulates and becomes cheese. But there is a small percentage which remains in liquid form. So that's nisyuvi dechalbi. So therefore, since, says the Gemara, even with cow's milk, there is a little bit that always remains liquid. So if you just take a little bit and you turn it in, and you try and turn it into cheese, it's not going to help you. Because if it doesn't turn into cheese, then it doesn't mean that it was tomei. It might just be that you took the bit which is nisyubi dechalba. So because it's not a foolproof test, because b'tahir, Rashi's going to explain. We're going to see. Says Rashi, says the Gemara, because with nisyubi dechalba, because even with cow's milk, there is a small amount, there is whey, deloi kaimi, that doesn't coagulate, leka lemekem ala de milsa. There is no way of knowing definitively whether there is a bit of camel's milk in it or not. Says Rashi, Rashi explains this. Let's have a look at source 2. Says Rashi, leka lemekem ala de milsa. We cannot clarify with any certainty why Shema nis'arev by Chalav Stam. It could be really, says Rashi, there is a bit of camel milk in there. And when you coagulated this little bit, I made tahor shabai. What happened was the tahor bit was I made. In other words, you always expect a certain amount of coagulate, hard, and a bit of liquid. Right. You always expect that, even with cow's milk. So what am I going to do? I'm going to take half a liter, let's say a small amount, and I'm going to do an experiment to see, because I'm going to say to myself, if it coagulates, then it's definitely cow's milk. Not necessarily. It could really be there's a little bit of camel milk in. And the whey that you see there, the liquid, isn't the whey that you would expect to see from cow's milk, but actually it's the camel milk. That's what it is. So when I expect a certain amount of liquid to remain, but I have no way of identifying what that liquid is, and therefore the whole experiment does not work. Now, if you, okay, was it maybe the I made tahor shabai v'hatomei nisharin ha-nisyubi, and the camel milk remains with the whey. Hilkoch ein nisoyon lahachshir harishonim le'echol. Therefore, there is no empirical way to clarify, says Rashi, to be machshir the rishonim, to allow me to eat the rest. Ava ligvina, but for cheese, now here this is interesting. Okay, so we've got that. But the Gemara at this stage is saying what? But that's only if you're going to take away a little bit. But the Gemara already said if you're going to take the whole lot and make cheese, then you're okay. Says Rashi, yeah? Because if you take the whole amount and you make cheese, then I'm going to allow you. Because why? I mean, still we have possibly a little bit of a problem. Maybe the guy put a tiny bit of camel milk in it, and it is the camel milk which is the nisyubi. So it's not that easy to understand why that is. But Rashi is saying that if you take all of it and make cheese out of it, and it successfully makes cheese, you're okay. It's unlikely that there's any Chalav Stam in it. But if you're only taking a small sample, a tiny amount, then it doesn't indicate on this big amount. Oh. There is what to ask on this, but that is how Rashi learns. But we're not finished the Gemara yet. We're not finished the Gemara yet. So let's just review. Where are we up to? The Gemara is trying to work out why is Chalav Stam what you and I would call Chalav Akum. Why is it also? The Gemara says it's not because you substituted because I would see it with the color. It's not because of it can't be because of adulterating it, because then I could turn it into cheese. Says the Gemara, yes, if you turn it all into cheese, you're right. That would be okay. The problem is if I want it for something else. The only problem is if I want it for something else. Okay? Says the Gemara, take a little bit and do an experiment. A little bit doesn't help you. Finished. Yeah. Now says the Gemara, there is an alternative answer. Another answer. Back to the Gemara. Last line of the Gemara. Even if you tell me that you actually want to make cheese, I will still not allow you. Unlike the first teretz. The first teretz says, if you're going to make it all into cheese, you're fine. Because chalav tamei won't be made. Second teretz says, that's not going to help you. Why? Ika dekoi beini atfa. Because there is always a little bit of milk left in between the cracks. Which is kind of the challenge we had on the first answer, with a little bit. In other words, maybe there will be 5% of its camel milk, right? For argument's sake, right? So what's going to help? The first teretz says, turn it into cheese. Says the second teretz, even if you turn it all into cheese, you'll still have 5% of liquid, which you expect. Like we said with chalav tahor, you also expect a small amount of nisu with the chalbi, of whey. And maybe that chalav, which is beinei atfi, which is the cracks, there's milk, in other words, something liquid always remains. Whey, milk, a little bit, it always remains. It doesn't become cheese 100%. There is whey. There is this other thing. So you still don't know. In other words, the same challenge that we had in the first answer, this teretz is saying, you have the same challenge if you make it all into cheese. You still don't know. Okay. You with me? I can see you're struggling there.
No, it's just even if you make it into cheese, there's still milk remaining.
That's right.
So there will be,
and you don't know what that is, so it's not going to help you. That's why the second teretz argues with the first teretz. Okay. When you come to the end of this piece of Gemara, now you need to paskin, Rabbi Isai. Now you need to paskin. What question for you now? Yeah. Whether it's let's not go into that. I have milk here. I don't know what this milk is. I want to turn it into cheese. The Gentile tells me that it's milk of a cow. Yeah. It looks whitish, but I don't know. There could be 5% camel milk in it. I don't know. Okay. What would you say on the basis of this Gemara? I want to turn it all into cheese. What would you say?
Well, looks like it's forbidden. Looks like bittul doesn't help.
If you say it still stays, then you would say you should only make cheese out of this way. Because if even if the tests stand that there's no color and everything, then still, because something is left, you cannot rely on that. And even if you make everything, there's still milk left. So
according to the
second test.
Right. So what I was looking for was, Rabbi, it depends. Do we paskin like the first teretz? Yeah. Do we paskin like the second? That's simple. I'm not trying to trick you here, guys. Avi, that's it, simple. The answer is, on the basis of Gemara, what would the halacha be? It depends. Are we going to paskin like the first answer? Are we going to paskin like the second?
But you said we have to paskin. Paskin is not, it depends.
Okay. I'm saying what would you say, where are we at? Where are we up to? Where are we up to? What is it looking like? The answer is, it's going to depend. There are two different opinions in the Gemara. If you take it all and you make it into cheese, whether you'd be able to eat it or not. Nachon? Yes? So it depends. But rega. This is what we're doing. We're building up the sugya stage by stage. That's what we're doing. Here we find something absolutely fascinating, and this is source 3, which is a Rosh. V'chein girsas. I've written here v'chein girsas harif Ramban v'ritva. There is an alternative girsa in the Gemara, which Rov Rishonim seem to have. Shaloi Karashi, and it changes it all. Let's have a look. I'm going to let you spot it. Let's learn the Rosh on this sugya. Zog the Rosh. Lemay 3. Look, says the Rosh first brings the Gemara. Chalav lemay necheshla, I mishum chilufi, Tahir chiver, Tomer yorek, ve'imi shumeru ve'chalav tomei nekum, damama chalav torei made torei noimade, I de kabayle gvina hachanami, ach b'mayaskinon de bayle lekimcha, v'nishkal minei kali v'nekum, kiven de betoir, nami ikan nisyuva de loikoi, lekele mekem alo de milsa. Hashta de osis lahachi, gvina nama ikka de koi bene atva. Now that we've arrived at this stage, so there's, even with all the cheese, there will always be a bit of milk left. Have you spotted the fundamental difference between Rashi and the way he was Goris in the Gemara and the Rosh, Rif, Ramban, Ritva?
Well,
I'm making you work this morning. Go on.
There's only one.
Oh! Gewaldig! Gewaldig!
Only one answer.
Yeah.
Nobody goes saying that.
There's no Iboyasema.
Yeah.
It's not an Iboyasema.
Okay.
It says as follows. There is only one answer. The answer is that we started saying that it looks like we say if you want cheese, if you're going to make it all into cheese, it would be okay. Says the Gemara. 1 second. Just take a little bit. Just take a little bit. Says the Gemara. No. If you take a little bit, then you can't prove either way. Says the Gemara according to the Rosh, Rif, Ramban, Ritva, Hashta da Asis Lahachi. Now that you tell me that turning something into cheese is not a definitive proof whether there was an adulteration or not, Hashta da Asis Lahachi, Gvino Nami, even if you turn it all into cheese, you also won't have any proof. And therefore, we don't have two opinions here in the Gemara, we only have one, which basically says, you're stuffed. You're stuck. There is no way of knowing. So, if we learn the Gerus of the Gemara according to Rashi, then you have a shaila, do I pass like the first answer, do I pass like the second answer? The Rosh, the Rif, the Ramban, and the Ritva all say, what's the halacha? There's only one pshat. You want to know why Chalav Stam is asur? Because we're worried about adulteration. And I have no way of checking. And that's why Yisrael Ro'ehu, you have to be there to observe that there's no adulteration. Simple. That's where we're up to. Good?
Yeah.
Yes?
Wonderful.
Vaita. Says that Goa Sashri. And here, I was going to say, here's where the fun starts. So here's a story. That Goa Sashri, there on the Rosh, says as follows. Yisrael shahalach, source 4. Yisrael shahalach likfar liknois gvinos. A Jew goes to market. He goes to the village to buy cheeses. Ve'enom yoidim, and the Gentiles don't know. Enom yoidim, they don't know shedas Yisrael lahakpi kol hacholov. They don't know. He goes to, in other words, it says he was going to buy cheese, but he isn't buying cheese. They don't know that the Jew wants to coagulate all of it. They don't know that, those that are selling it to them. Then, afilu le'ra Yisrael hachaliva klal shoru. Even if the Jew did not see the chaliva, the cheese is mutter. What's going on? Even if you want to say that it should be asur, ki hagavna heicha shara hakoil levad hascholas hachalov hachaliva muta. Says that Goa Sashri. Even if you want to tell me in such a case it's asur, but grant me that if he saw everything besides, he saw the cheese making, but he didn't see the milking, it should still be muta. So the Goa Sashri is saying as follows: if you buy cheese and you saw the cheese making, let's say, right, but you didn't see the milking, he says it would be mutter. What's going on? It would be mutter, right? Why? Why should it be mutter? He didn't see the milking. Maybe there's some adulteration. Upa'am achas omar oved kechovim li Yisrael likach gvinois. It once happened that a Gentile told a Jew to buy cheese. In other words, he said, "Do you want to buy cheese?" But the milk was already milked. He was already at milk, and he said, "Do you want some cheese? I can take this milk for you and make it into cheese." This was the case. So the Jew shows up at the farm, whatever it is, and the Gentile says to him, "Do you want to make some cheese? Here, I've got some milk, freshly milked." But the Jew didn't see the chaliva, so he didn't know what to do. V'holach v'asahu. And he did it. He made the cheese out of milk that he hadn't seen. V'hitir Rabbeinu Tam. And Rabbeinu Tam said, you can have the cheese. V'omnom ein lahatir kulahai heichadeleka hefsed meruba. But, says Rabbeinu Tam, and I'm not sure whether this is, by the way, I'm actually not sure, whether this is the Hagos Hashri himself, or it is Rabbeinu Tam. He says, however, we're not going to be so makel if there is no hefsed meruba. There has to be hefsed meruba. So, what do we have so far? We had a machlekes Rashi and the other Rishonim how to learn. It would seem that just making cheese itself is not a problem. So far, it would seem that if you comply with all of the requirements of Gevinas Yisrael, whatever that is, we haven't discussed that yet. How do you make Gevinas Yisrael? We haven't discussed that. We'll come to it at some point. But let's say you were to comply with all of the requirements of having Gevinas Yisrael, but the Chalav, you've got no clue, you weren't there and you didn't see it. Is it a problem or not? It would seem, according to most of these Rishonim, it is a problem. Rabbeinu Tam seems to have said, it's okay. The Agos Hashri says behefsed meruba. What I'm going to do with you now, because I don't want us to get caught up too much in the Rishonim, is we're going to skip a bit, but we might go back. And I'm going to take you to source 7, which is the Ramah. Okay? So now we're getting to Halacha L'Maisa. Halacha L'Maisa. Here says the Ramah. Imra'a asiyas hagvinois v'lo ra'a hachaliva. The Jew saw the making of the cheese. So from the cheese perspective, whatever that means, we're going to see the machlekes Ramah and Shach how to do that. But if the Jew saw the asiyas hagvinos, but he didn't see the milk, says the Ramah, yesh lahatir b'di'eved. B'di'eved, it's mutter. Ki ein lachush shema irav boy davar tomei. You don't need to be worried that he would have put a bit of camel's milk in. Me'achas she'asa gvinos min hachalav. Because he made cheese out of the milk. The Gentile, remember the Gentile is making the cheese. Go back to the beginning. Imra asiyas hagvinos v'lo. The Jew saw the asiyas hagvinos. He didn't make it. The Gentile made it. Which means that the assumption, it seems at the moment, is that the Gentile, what production was this? It was a cheese production. He milked in order for cheese. Now, there would be no point, no logic to put camel's milk into a pail of milk that you intend making cheese for. That would just be stupid because it doesn't work. Exactly. And that's the svara the Ramah is using, which comes from the Agos Hashri, and we'll see. But the Ramah says it mefurish. Let's see. You don't need to be worried. Maybe mixed in some camel milk. Because the Gentile made cheese out of it. Ki davar tomei eina omeid, like we saw. The davar tomei won't make cheese. Says the Ramah. Because there's no logic to assume that he would put anything else in, because it wouldn't make sense. It would be stupid. I'm trying to make cheese. Why would I put something in that doesn't make cheese? Umikol mokoim asur le'echol hachalav kach. Says the Ramah. However, you could have a kluge yid would come along and say, I know that if you take this milk and you turn it into cheese, because that's what he wanted to do, if I know this is what he wanted, and I say to him, you know what, I'd like to have a coffee just before you make the cheese. Could I take some of this milk and have my coffee? Says the Ramah, Now we need to understand this. So let's review. What do we have here? We have the following. The Ramah paskins, and we'll see who he's paskening like and exactly why. Probably do that tomorrow. Not tomorrow, unfortunately. I mentioned to you, I've got to go to the restaurant tomorrow to unload supervise the unloading of the meat. We won't mix the milk and the meat, so they won't have the shir tomorrow, unfortunately. But the Ramah paskins b'di'evet. Let's be clear, it's b'di'evet. So b'di'evet, if you know that he was milking in order to make cheese, and he made cheese out of it, you don't have a problem of Chalav Stam, and therefore you could b'di'eved. Once it's done, you could, and we need to define b'di'eved. But what happens if you arrive too late, and the milk is there already? Can you allow him to make the cheese out of it? You can't drink the milk, says the Ramah, but shaila for you, Could you allow him now? He comes to you and says, "Oh, Rabbi, I know you wanted me to wait for you, but whatever. The car broke down. You came late. Whatever it is, whatever the reason." Yeah, the cow broke. Very good. Would you then be able to tell him, "Oh, it's okay. You know what? It's okay. Go. It's okay. I'll watch you now. Go and make the cheese." That's an interesting shaila.
That's not the B'diavad case.
At what point is it considered?
Or is that called b'diavad? That's the shaila. Is that already called b'diavad?
In this case, no, that's not. I would say.
Okay, we hear what you say. You're very frum. We'll see. We'll see whether there are poskim at Tamekel. We'll come to that. So this is where we are at, and let's just do a very. There's a long shach and there's a small shach. We'll do the small shach today. Says the shach. We're going to see a big machlokes, shach and taz, and get to the achronim as well. So the shach says in 8. The Ramah says because his kavanah was to make cheese. Says the shach. Koloimar sheyadanu bevadai shedato lasis gvinos. We know for a fact that his intention was to make cheese. V'chein mashma b'divrei haposkim v'isa b'tshuvas maram sham da'afilu hoyolei dova tomei be'edroi. You know he also milks camels. He has camels there. Dova tomei be'edroi. The Gemara discusses this. He has a flock. He has in the farm. He also has chazerim. He also has horses. He also has camels, and he milks them. Even that case, mutar b'diavad mehaitama dadas ha'ovid kechavim lahakpi, because if his intention was for cheese production, it would make no sense for him to do that, and we can rely on that b'diavad, and we'll have to see what b'diavad means. Shkaya.